Greetings. Greetings to you all, and I bid you shalom. Welcome to the People's Movement Show here on 107.1 FM, interestingly so. And we'll speak a bit more as to what we're doing here and the beauty of having collaborations of this nature. Welcome, I'm Nigel London, and I'm here this evening with much joy, having the opportunity to again engage Guyanese, to engage those of you at home and those abroad, as now that the famous term has been reignited, the diaspora. I'm happy to share this time with you because the people's movement happens to be a concept, a consciousness, a movement in which Guyanese are understanding every day the value and the significance of us uniting across political, ethnic, cultural, and so many other divides in the bid to rescue our nation for the benefit of our future generations. There are too many ills in our society, and there are too many ills that are occurring so rapidly in our society that we cannot afford to be quiet any longer as Guyanese people. And we understand, as is often said, that the power is in the people of this nation. It is said, but is very often, or it's infrequently practiced. The people's movement is about a group of Guyanese, a group in terms of there's no particular number to us. You cannot put a tag on us or so. We are just Guyanese across the world who understand the significance of holding elected officials accountable, who understand the role we must play, including elected officials, in ensuring that this nation is governed in a manner that is beneficial to Guyanese indeed, not just some, but all Guyanese. As a result of that, there are many faces who are, by practice, demonstrating the essence of the people's movement. There are those who are not tied with chains and cords to political parties that limit their ability to speak. I believe firmly that every Guyanese, especially man in this nation, must have the courage, must have the strength and the tenacity to speak without fear. And even if he has fear, he must still speak the truth. Speak to that which is right. Speak to those who are being paid by his tax-paying dollars. Every Guyanese must have that courage again to speak. This evening, I have the joy, and some of you will understand more a bit as to why I am normally eager to engage Mr. Mark Benschop. And the reason why I can share it with you, and I shared it with him when he comes into studio here to have the discussion. I requested a conversation with him because of the history, his experience in Guyana. It is so rich because of his willingness to share, because of his desire to say things as they should be said. And more than anything else, for all Guyanese to understand that we must be free to interact with people as long as what they are saying benefits all Guyanese or benefits the genuine pursuit of joy, the pursuit of what is good for Guyanese. I am not here to have a conversation of agreement or in agreement. I'm here to have a conversation that's mature and a conversation that hopefully will help all of us who can be helped at this time. So with that in mind, I welcome, interestingly again I say, to the People's Movement Show, the one and only Mr. Mark Benschop. Welcome. Welcome to you. And thank you so much for taking the opportunity to share this platform with me in what I would consider to be an interesting and an intriguing night for those who are viewing. If you are able to, please share this broadcast. Share it as many times as you're allowed to share it. Share it with as many people as you're allowed to share it. Because, Mr. Benschop, let me welcome you to the People's Movement Show as one of the first individuals who has a platform as yours, but is willing to have this engagement, this conversation, without being sent the questions to prepare you, which I find to be more interesting. You're taking a major risk. However, we are mature enough to know what a conversation should entail. So, welcome, and feel free to, of course, engage an audience here.
Yeah, and thank you so much. We are still the camera's a little blurry, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we're trying to get it fixed. If you can just forgive me for a second.
Did you
And
touch it or something? Seems to be smudged a little bit.
yeah, just give me a second, please, Apostle, and apologize to your listeners as well. I am your guest. I should have been prepared. Just give me a quick second. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. So while Mr. Benchop is going to get some tissue, wipe his camera lens off, we can engage. Again, I ask you to be kind enough to share the broadcast. You would really want to have this. Yes, the view is a bit blurry. So we want to have an engagement on this show this evening that I say it's mature. It's mature because we must return to a place, or we restore to a place in which we can have conversations about things that may be painful, about events in our lives that are significant. And we must be able to have these conversations to the benefit of all. So there you are, you're back. So welcome to the People's Movement Show. You've been kind enough to uh, allow me to utilize 107.1 FM and, of course, your platform, and you're on mine. So this, I say, is a collaboration that's very interesting. Um, and hopefully others can look at this and garner something positive from it. So welcome again. We can see you
Thank
clearly now. The
thank
rain
you.
is gone.
Thank you so much, and good evening to your listeners. I say your listeners because this is your platform. You requested an interview with me, and I granted you that interview. Like you correctly stated, that there were no questions sent to me. You are free to conduct the interview however you want to conduct it. I am here to answer all of your questions.
And I am certainly overjoyed to know that you are willing to take such a risk. But it shows that you are someone who is prepared and would have had quite a bit of experience in terms of being responsible and having a certain image. And that's the first thing I want to engage you about this evening for the sake of those who are younger. I don't want to appear as if we are old, but we're old enough to consider others younger than we are. And to those who see you or hear of you by name, what is in your view the most apt or accurate definition of who you are in reference to public image, a public figure?
Uh, People's oriented, fearless, um, brave, committed, passionate uh, about human beings, passionate about people's rights, just one who's willing to give it up all just to ensure that people's rights are respected.
Wow, wow, interesting. So do you see yourself as an activist, a social activist, a political activist of some sort?
I see myself as a human being who wants to play that role in society. And there are people who describe me as an activist, political, social activist, whatever it is that they describe me for the moment. But, you know, in a nutshell, I am more just me, a humble me. Since a little boy growing up, it's always been the same me. People who knew me from back then, 40 something years ago, they know, those who would have attended primary school with me, secondary school with me, university with me, they know that it is just the same me. Nothing really has changed. Nothing much has changed.
Wow.
It's the same me.
Interesting indeed. Um, so let me go deeper then, and I really wanted people to know, to have an idea as to who you are in reference to how you see yourself, because it has a lot to do with how you present yourself. And I think that the naturalness of which you just spoke is because when you speak to me, I do not sense that there's shades behind you. And I'm quite discerning in that area. I do not sense there are ulterior motives in reference to our conversations. And I think that's why it's sometimes, or more often than not, quite pure. Most people, including some of my children, know of your name from the treason charge that was laid against you. You became quite renowned for that. And you were in prison for 5 years, wrongfully, of course. And I'm not asking you whether you were guilty or not. I'm saying that according to the law, you were innocent. But you spent 5 years of your life in a prison in Guyana. And there's a generation that may not necessarily know of that era and under what circumstances you found yourself in prison. And I'll share with you before you answer why I'm here. Because your experience has given birth, in my view, and I recollected quite a bit since we engaged us to this interview here, that there may be some connection between your experience and the present fear in people to take to the streets and act in a manner that is, in their view, too hot. And as a result, they may encounter police officers being quite forceful. Share with us, please, if you don't mind, that experience. What was it like for you to be engaged in, you're a young man, you're charged with treason on the PPP regime? Tell us about that, please.
Anytime one is in a struggle, and I've always maintained that being in a struggle, especially standing up against oppressive regimes, and in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would agree, the PPP was an oppressive regime during those years. It's not to say it's anything different now, but standing up to the PPP back then, anything one can be prepared for, either death, either incarceration, constant tortures, physical and otherwise, or just banish away out of the country. I decided to remain there and confront the ills of the regime. Extrajudicial killings, I saw it every day. I read about it in the newspapers. I saw it on the news. And I couldn't sit down and allow that to happen. I read about people being tortured. I read about people being brutalized by the police force. I couldn't sit down and watch that happen without confronting the regime or the police force. Yes, those days were very brutal days. People were slaughtered, being slaughtered left, right, and center every day. People were being tortured. People were being locked up wrongfully. And I had a choice. I didn't have to do what I did, but I was very committed to the cause because I thought then, and I still do believe, that no matter what the outcome is, we must be brave enough to stand up against any form of dictatorial regime, any form of oppressive regime. And just prior to my incarceration for that trumped up treason charge, of course, I knew that it was coming. It was either that or death. And I was prepared to face either of the two, the treason charge or death.
So were you, when you were incarcerated, were you at any point over those 5 years? Because I left Guyana 1 year after your incarceration, so I was here when it happened. I was working for the Secondary School Reform Project, and when it was in July, I think it was somewhere around the third or so in 2002. Because this is so vivid in my memory. I can remember that day. I remember that the protesters, I think, had something to do with bauxite. They were headed to Georgetown and so on, and they had Bino, I think, was leading the protest. You found yourself being deemed a wanted man. You found yourself in prison. You were waiting for trials, and every so often you see something about your court appearance and so on. Did you become despondent and lose hope? And I'll ask you why after you answer the question. Did you at any point during the 5 years become despondent and say, you know what, it isn't worth it?
The first 6 months, I had a strong, very strong support base. Thousands of people inside and outside of Guyana. That strong support base, family support base as well. And the first 6 months, because I knew that I was being railroaded, I knew that the regime at that time wanted to just have me lost away in prison forever, so to speak. And within the first 6 months of my incarceration in, of course, solitary confinement, um,
Wow.
it was the most difficult, the first 6 months, because you all sort of things start to go through your mind, and those little tricks, like, and something came out of that. Was that I recalled meeting one of my heroes, Mr. Nelson Mandela, President Mandela, the late, and shaking his hands and talking with him for at least a good 10-15 minutes about his incarceration. And at that time, when I reflect on my meeting with Mr. Nelson Mandela, I was reading his book again, Long Walk to Freedom. And in that book, there's a part that he wrote when he spent, I believe, 2 or 3 nights in solitary confinement. He said he couldn't take it. And he had tremendous amount of respect for other brothers in the prison during his time who spent 1 month in solitary confinement. He said he'd take his hats off to those individuals, but he couldn't take solitary confinement. So, the little talking in my mind started to lift me up to say, hey, come on. Did you just read that Nelson Mandela, the great, said that he couldn't take 2 or 3 nights of solitary confinement? But here it is. You're approaching, or over 6 months, approaching 1 year in solitary confinement. So I got a wake-up call from that. And I'm like, I start to, uh, find ways and means to uplift myself, to say, wait a minute, if Nelson Mandela, my hero, couldn't take 3 days of solitary confinement, and I'm here almost a year, come on, snap out of it. I don't care how long they get me in here. I don't care how long they keep me in here. I'm not going to let jail get to me. I am going to be on top of the situation. I am not going to be or have any officer ridicule me or belittle me by saying, hey, prisoner, because the whole objective is to take away your identity when you're there. And I refused that. From that day on, I refused it. I don't know where I got that strength from, but I became a different person.
And this is quite profound. And the reason why I asked the question about becoming despondent, because I cannot recall, maybe you can remind me if it happened. As I said, I left the country just after that, and I was away for 15 years. But was there any, according to your knowledge, any massive protests by the opposition of the day, the PNC, by members of the public to fight on the street, that is, to protest your incarceration? Are you aware of any such thing after you got incarcerated wrongfully?
Yeah, there are times when I attended court, the lower court, for the mock of a preliminary inquiry. There were hundreds of people on the streets. And that's why I salute those people who were brave enough to be there in the streets, those who were allowed to attend court with me. Of course, they had barricades miles away. They blocked off the entire area, about 5-6 blocks away. So no vehicles, nobody, nothing, absolutely nothing. And it went on for months that way. But in answering your question, there were always people dozens, a couple hundreds of folks who were protesting, who were out there. And I always remember those people, and I'm always grateful to them. At that time, Mr. Hoyt was alive, and Mr. Hoyt was very active. I recall during the preliminary, of course, Mr. Hoyt was the opposition leader then. He attended court on several occasions, based on my recollection, and he was very active. He got lawyers such as Roysdale Ford, Basil Williams, Emily Dotson,
Yes.
Carol, I believe her name, Martindale, uh, and these young lawyers, lawyers in general, got together to say, we cannot leave this guy out there. We have to help him. And I say kudos to, of course, the late Mr. Hoyt, who was then opposition leader, for that. And so to give you that idea, since you weren't around, there were people who were out there standing up. They knew, those who were out there standing up, and even thousands of other people knew that it was an injustice, that I was being persecuted because of my political views and because of my political actions on the ground.
Wow. And I'm happy to hear that, because it will lead us into discussing the transition over those years as to what we now see in Guyana. And but for those who are just joining, I'm engaging one who's a brother in this struggle to render or to have a better Guyana before all of us. Under the PPP regime, you'd have heard him speak to, and this is international news, being incarcerated, being laced with this treason charge, and spending 5 years in the cell of a prison in Camp Street. I wanted to really resonate with people in Guyana, because there's a generation that doesn't seem to understand, do not seem to get it. The nature of some politicians still prominent in our society. They don't seem to understand the mentality of some politicians who now seem to be caring according to their confession. Has Broward Jagdeo ever apologized to you for what you would have experienced, or anyone from PPP Civic, top brass as they're called, Nandalal and those?
Um, Not by words. And I'll start with the magistrate,
Okay.
Chandra Sohan. I met Chandra Sohan years later at a horse racing event on the quarantine, Port Morant. I stopped by there, and I was reluctant because the wounds were still fresh.
Okay.
And we shook hands, and I can sense that the sadness in his face. He didn't right there and then apologized, but his actions, I, I, I I read that to mean that he was sorry for what transpired. I have since heard on numerous occasions that when Mr. Sohan is in the company of friends, maybe taking a few shots, that he would talk about the case and how he was forced into doing what he did, even knowing that he had no evidence to throw my case up in the High Court. Um, Priya Manik Chan also fought against me having an early trial. When my case was called, Priya Manik Chan along, who is now the Minister of Education, um, she, along with others, blocked my trial. She claimed that there were other prisoners awaiting trial way longer than I have. And she suddenly believed in the rights of these prisoners. And meanwhile, I agree that there were prisoners languishing in prisons, but nobody cared about those prisoners.
Mhm.
But suddenly, Priya Manik Chan is so concerned about prisoners getting an early trial. And so she was one of them who blocked my early trial, blocked my case from being heard. And so when I got out of 5+ years of solitary confinement at the Camp Street prison, I ran into Priya Manik Chan at Nigel's supermarket. Priya Manik Chan held on to my hand, and with tears in her eyes, well, about to drop, She looked at me and she says, "I am sorry."
Wow.
And I never forget that. "I am sorry." I ran into the judge who presided over my case, Judge Winston Moore. A lot of people don't know, but Winston Moore, who is now deceased, uh, was actually a relative of mine. But he tried a case. He did not accept no case submission, even though he should have, because there was no case in the first place. But he
Correct.
didn't want to take that chance. He threw it to the jury. I ran into him at I believe a karaoke place out in Guyana, and he looked at me and I said, "Why did you do what you did, even though you knew that there was no evidence?" He just smiled because he just smiled and that's it. He's now deceased, and I've long forgiven him. Then I ran into Judge William Ramlal, who is now head of the Police Complaints Authority. Then I ran into some other judges who played their hands badly with my case. And some expressed an apology to me, whereas some I could read from their body language and facial expressions that they were sorry. I also ran into two of the three prosecutors. I call them persecutors. Anil Nandalal being one of them. Anil, obviously, he doesn't show much remorse, and so it was difficult it wasn't difficult to conclude that he just didn't give a damn. At least that was his expression. I have since gotten a better relationship with the other prosecutor, Sanjeev Dattadin, who I'm sure has been very apologetic by way of actions. So that's just a list of individuals who have played me a bad hand. In fact, the director of public prosecution then, Dennis Hanuman Singh. Yeah, he was very remorseful, very apologetic, and those are just a few names that I recall.
No Jack Deal.
Yeah, and I haven't seen him. I can't recall ever seeing him face to face. But Guyana is a very small place, and you will hear, I will hear things that Jack Deere would probably want to meet with you. Of course, I didn't see any reason why. Or at that time, the foundation was up and running, the Benschop Foundation, which was actually birthed because I wanted to give back to people, especially those hundreds of people, those thousands of people who were out there, who were protesting, those who were praying for me or whatever. So when I had an opportunity to, when folks in a meeting in the US asked, "What should we do? What can we do for you, Mark?" I said, "That's okay. Let's find a way to do for people."
Wow.
Not about me. Let's do for people. And that's how the Benschop Foundation came about as a result of that. And I've heard things to the effect that Jack Dio, he's sorry for what happened and he would want to do something and whatever. But I never paid that any mind. And so he has never publicly apologized. One of the things that he did say, though, which is he hoped that I learned my lesson.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah. Okay. But I must go down this path because I was interested in the case. I love law for whatever reason. I just love law and sports. I had an interest in the matter. And I couldn't stand injustice in the first place. But I note that a fellow Londoner in the person of Bino was a co-accused. I don't know if it's a co-accused or he's another one accused of a separate incident. But I saw him as a co-accused, and he never spent the day before the court. Has Bino, because like I said, because I followed the case so closely, and on the day when it happened, I think I was in Georgetown getting home from work or something. But I know there wasn't the protests and so on. And there you are incarcerated or being deemed a wanted man. You turn yourself into lawyers. Bino has disappeared. I read that Bino once said that you really had nothing to do with the matter, which is the truth. And for those who are too young to know, person stormed the office of the president, the compound. 2 people were shot. And here it is, Mr. Benschop. I think you were saying that telling the police don't shoot protesters. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Right. So you
In
are
fact,
asking. Go ahead.
in fact, Apostle, the role that I played after I turned up, when I heard what sounded then like gunshots and turned out to be gunshots, that the presidential guards were ordered to shoot innocent protesters. The only thing that came out of that loud hailer that I had in my hands was, please do not shoot the people. Please stop shooting the people.
Wow.
At the window there at the office of the president, standing, was Robert Passad, who was then either the Minister of Agriculture or he was the press liaison to Jack Deere, and the head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Roger Luncheon. I looked in their direction and said, please order the people, the presidential guards, to stop shooting innocent people. Stop shooting innocent people. Now, I don't know where in the world someone saying, please stop shooting innocent people constitutes a charge of treason or an
And
act
that,
of treason, sorry.
yes, sorry. But and that in itself is what I found to be most egregious and most painful to me on your part. But in reading about the news while I was away, of course, we didn't have social media then, so I would have to wait and try to get information every so often. And then Chronicle went online, I think, and Starbuck went online, so I'd be reading about your matter. Starbuck News went online. But I have never read Philip Bino through an attorney. Maybe you can speak to this. Because again, I say there's some connection between what you have been through as an individual and what I'm seeing on a larger scale in society. I've never heard Philip Bino call anyone to say, please, Mr. Benschop, Mark had nothing to do with this. He was nowhere involved in the arrangement. Or his attorneys would have spoken to the court and say, well, I heard from the co-accused and he said this man is innocent. Has there been any such event during your 5-year trial?
I don't think Philip Bino was the number one accused. I was the number two.
Oh, okay.
The target wasn't Philip Bino. They didn't want Philip Bino. Philip Bino wasn't a threat to the PPP regime. Philip Bino was more a friend of the PPP regime then. I don't know what's his position now.
Okay.
And so over the years leading up to that July 3rd event that Philip Bino said he was in control of, and probably was, because I honestly had nothing to do with planning of anything.
Right.
Prior to that, I recall maybe meeting Philip Bino months ago, or even prior to that. I didn't know Philip Bino in any personal capacity for me to sit and want to plan anything with somebody I don't know personally. I recall that some folks from Kokwani, bauxite workers from Kokwani and other places, were in Georgetown. All of us were protesting in front of the Parliament building. That's when I saw Philip Bino. Filipino's words were to me then that um, he is going to show Georgetown people how this thing is done. And some colorful language, colorful words. And I think I had to pull him up on that, if you're going to speak to me properly. And outside of that, that's all of the sort of relationship I've had with Filipino. Now,
Okay.
why would I sit to plan some sort of ridiculous overthrowing of any government with somebody that I don't know? I don't know. Anyways, they weren't interested in Bino. And so Bino wasn't really, from what I've heard, Bino wasn't really in hiding per se. Bino was conducting his business, timber logging or whatever, his business. He was seen around. Policemen knew where he was. He was in touch with the operatives at Freedom House, from what I was told. And in fact, I think one of the senior guys in the PPP admitted that he was in touch with them. So they knew where he was. They weren't interested in him. They were interested in ensuring that they placed me there in solitary confinement at the Camp Street prisons under horrible conditions, locked away in a cell for 23 plus hours a day. No sunlight for almost a year. So they knew what they were up to. So Bino wasn't any guy that he was eluding the police and they couldn't find him. Like I said, he knew where, and even if he had called in through his lawyer to say Mark had nothing to do with that, which is a fact. They knew that as well. So they didn't have to wait for
Right, right.
call them to say, hey, that guy had nothing to do with that. They didn't have to. They knew what they were doing. They knew what their plans were. And they knew who their target person was. And it wasn't Filipino.
Yeah. And that therefore leads me to discussing a more current Mark. Because you've been through so much and you could have just thrown in the towel and said, well, you're done with this, you're free, you're about to go about your life, and you were dealt such a bad hand here. That could have been the concept. But I see you quite differently, that you still continue to advocate for the rights of people. You still continue to agitate for there to be justice and fairness in so many ways. Um, what causes you to continue this fight, though you've been through so much? Here you are again, dealing with some of the same people in the PP regime. What has you still so driven to be engaged in what you're doing?
Well, as indicated in the beginning, that this has always been me, my passion. Growing up on the quarantine, of course, a Londoner, but I at a very tender age moved to the quarantine, and I couldn't see people taking advantage of. I couldn't see a poor child or not share something with that child. Whether it's a mango, we all hang together. So I know about that. I saw it. I experienced it also. And so from that very tender age, even in school, from primary school, I recall at Prep A, Prep B, I even recall when I was there for mass games. And, the thing is, I've always been that person in class who's first to stand up, who's first to speak out, who's first to contribute, who's first to say to the guys, look, we're going to go look for this other lady or bus driver who drove away. We're going to do something. We're going to stand up for our rights.
Wow.
It has always been me. It is not in me to walk away, close up shop, and say, I'm never going to stand up for people's rights again. It is just not in me. Now, as I get older, the methodology or methodologies do change, because you say, well, look,
right,
I may have done this X, Y, or Z way I'm going to apply different methods this time around. But it doesn't mean that I have given up. It is just me. And it will
Just
be
you.
me, this passionate me, to stand up against oppressors, dictators, bullies in the police force, whomever they are, drug lords, death squads. It is just me. Nobody
So
is going to stop me.
what?
No incarceration is going to stop me. No dictator, Jack Deere or whomever, will ever stop me from doing that.
And yours, that is why, viewers, now you begin to hear why I said at the beginning that I always have this degree of pleasure in conversing with Mr. Benschop. And the reason why is because you represent what is appearing to be a fading culture. You are prepared to stand at all costs, whatever it is. That is beginning to wane. We're not seeing as much of that now in Ghana. We speak to that in a moment. I don't know how much time we have, but um, I can talk until midnight if possible because there's so much in you that a generation needs to hear. And I must inject here deliberately that even the atmosphere of this conversation is important, my brother, because I've been seeing it and it's something that's been ringing in my head. For whatever reason, this is not the time in our Ghanese terminology to have to skin teeth and laugh about everything. We are in some very perilous times, and hopefully we can get to that. But let me ask you some direct questions. I know in a court of law, sometimes the judge answers yes or no, and people say, well, Your Honor, or the attorney say, well, this should be an explanation. But you can explain if you want to. Do you hate Barra Jagdeo? Do you hate Jagdeo?
Yeah, I didn't come out of a culture or home where I was taught that hating people was the way to go. You don't hate an individual for the sake of hating.
Mm.
You may hate their actions. You may hate their policies. You may hate their politics. But as a believer, because I am a believer, I don't think that I want to sit here and say that I hate anyone.
See, and that's where we're different because the people who I hate, and I haven't been taught, I'm not being taught to hate. Because if I'm to try a person, if someone steals your money, I cannot jail the theft. I have to jail the thief. So if Jack Dio has injured you in such a way, or whoever it was, the scripture records that Yahweh hates the wicked. So I'm not a love everybody kind of person. Maybe that's why I'm considered controversial, whatever it is. I don't like everybody. I despise some people because they're just terrible. So I'm unable to separate a man from his actions because I believe that a man is married to his actions. However, um, do you hate the PPP Civic?
Yeah, this is not. And before I answer that question in hating the PPP Civic, um, I recall Nelson Mandela, President Nelson Mandela, the late, having had to deal with that very question asked
Mm-hmm.
when he was negotiating with the clerk at that time,
Right.
and Bota. People thought that he would walk out of prison with so much anger, so much bitterness, so much hatred towards those guys who incarcerated him for 20 something years, not 5 years,
27.
27 plus years. But here is a man walked out of prison. When he went to prison, he was about 49, maybe approaching 50. When I was forced into prison,
Right.
I was just about in my mid 20s,
Wow.
and so Mandela came out of prison far more matured, politically and otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
and he was able to shake de Klerk's hand, Botha, even a prison officer that spat in his face. He was able to forgive those people. That was Nelson Mandela.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to sit with them through what is called a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, spearheaded by the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He sat with all of his enemies, people who slaughtered Africans in Africa, people who tortured, people who wrongfully incarcerated thousands of fighters. And he was able to look at them in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think that is where some of my strength come from. To look at what Mandela would have endured, and having experienced a fraction of that, for me to walk out of the Camp Street prison being bitter would not have solved any problem. I would have made myself, probably I would not have been sitting here tonight looking as good looking as I am. Right? Maybe I would not. Maybe I'll just have a sour face, bitter, angry at the world, angry at everybody, angry at why some political figures back then didn't come and stand up and fight, and why they took a quiet position in my case, and all these different things.
I understand.
Different ways of handling situations. I'm saying that my way of handling it is to brush it aside, pick up, move on, learn from that experience. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life, which I hope is very, very long, to have any bitterness or hatred towards mankind. Now, it doesn't mean that things are all hunky-dory, mind you. It just means that I prefer not to use the term hate towards mankind, regardless of how wicked, regardless of how evil they may be. It is just not in me. And so you asked the question as to whether I hate the PPP. Again, using the word hate is very strong. I dislike policies that are against fellow human beings. I dislike racist policies. I dislike when those policies amount to economic genocide or political victimization, persecution of others. And whether it's the PPP, whether it's another party, if ever there's any party that does that to citizens, whether in Guyana or outside Guyana, I will have a serious problem with that party. And in answering your question, having outlined those sort of inhumane acts against citizens, maybe that explains why I dislike the happenings of the PPP.
Okay. Well, as I said, and that's why I'm so happy that we can have a healthy form of disagreement, and let us, hopefully those who are viewing, pay attention to how we can disagree. If we have a moment, we can engage in a as they call it, a rum shop argument, and we can go back and forth, and it doesn't get us anywhere, because at the end of the day, you're expressing how you feel about a matter. And I would love to, even with Mandela's situation, just in passing, Mandela has, to some degree, I can hear in your voice the honor you have for such a man who would have shared like experience with you as you would have had. But he failed, or he was tricked to some degree, in my view, because of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission they had and all that. Mandela was promised so many things for the people, that is. And today, 80% of South Africa is still owned in terms of land by white people. More than 90% of the wealth is still controlled by white people. The police force is still controlled by white people. Mandela was unable to do many things because he did not take the route of bringing the clerk and both and those to justice. For me, I believe that they should have been hung because they're evil people. They crushed his life. I believe that they should be at the International Court of Justice, Jagdeo and others, taken there because of what was done to you. Because although I believe in forgiveness, I only offer it to those who seek it. And that's just my confession based on scripture. Yeshua said, if your brother does wrong to you, you go to the brother and say he did wrong to me. If he repents, then you forgive him. So although I hear the the charm or the warmth in your voice to Mandela. The tragedy in South Africa left me to see Mandela did not represent his people as he should have because of promises that were made. Here you are in Guyana. There was no truth and reconciliation from our Benschop. There was nobody coming to your feet publicly to say, listen, we're sorry, we're wrong. There was not even a moment in this country's history of the PPP where you were brought to a forum and you were treated with some degree of regard. Now they're attacking you, saying that you're bad. That's why I ask you if you hate them, because I know they hate you for sure. Do you see any opportunity in the near future for there to be a conversation that's quite mature with you in the PPP Civic or elements with the PPP Civic, so that Guyanese can hear that we are able to, if possible, move forward, identify hurt, identify wrong, take responsibility for the wrong, and move forward? Do you see that as being possible under this PPP regime with you?
Before answering that, let me say that Mandela had the people's interest at heart. Whilst
Mm-hmm.
I see where you're coming from, is that Mr. Mandela didn't want a bloodbath
Yeah.
in his country. He avoided that catastrophe because there were lots and lots of Africans who were willing to go after uh, the Caucasian race, were willing to slaughter people and so forth. And I think Mr. Mandela put country ahead of anything else. And history will come up at some point in time to judge him fairly, to say that he made that sacrifice for betterment or for betterment of all South Africans. Now the question is, are they Africans better off today than how they were maybe during apartheid time? That's up for debate, and I would agree with you, Apostle, that South Africans deserve better. I don't know what happened other than some greedy politicians in the ANC. And oftentimes you find this is very prevalent when you have a leader with a vision, but have the men and women who are supposed to carry out that vision are doing their own thing. And we saw that in ANC, and we also saw that other parts of the world.
we, we surely did.
Yeah, we saw that in other parts of the world. Um, so, in answering your question, to sit and talk with a PPP regime under the leadership that we see right now, it's a difficult task for anybody because these guys, Jack Dew and Irfan and all of them, or for the most part, they do not believe in true governance. They do not believe in democracy. They do not believe in people's rights, human rights. They do not believe in fairness. They're governing through gangsterism, bullyism, but it has to stop. But that's how they're governing. And it's difficult to sit with people who have so much venom and hatred in their hearts for their fellow Guyanese, including their own supporters whom they're using. So I would rule out any sitting down, any form of talking with this current leadership of the PPP.
Okay.
I don't know what the leadership would be like next 3 years, 2 years or so, but it's difficult for any right thinking Guyanese to sit down and have any proper discourse with this current crop of leaders in the PPP because it will just be for photo op or some sort of using uh, for political purpose and these sort of things. And
But
I am grown. I am grown. So
yeah, but if we do not have the conversation, how what then do you recommend if you can? If there's no room in your view for a sensible conversation, I don't see much room for it either. But if there's no room for us to have a conversation whereby as men and women we can engage, even if we don't like each other,
look,
for the interest of Ghana, what do
Apostle,
you recommend?
Apostle, if these people in the current regime, the leaders, if they're serious about any sort of discussion, any sort of truth and reconciliation commission, let us move the country forward. Let us put our political differences aside. It's not about me. It's not
Right.
about you. It's not. It's about the people. It's about our country. billions and billions of dollars in oil, billions and billions of dollars in gold, and all these different things. But yet here it is, we are together. We are as a people fighting for crumbs, gold crumbs, drops of oil. That's all we're fighting for.
Yeah.
If this current leadership, the crop of leaders within the PPP, are willing to say, they have to make that first move. And some of the things that they can do that will make me even want to sit and say, well, look, we have a bigger picture to look at, is they have to stop persecuting people. They have to withdraw all of the charges against people that they're persecuting.
Yes.
They have to be able to make that first move. And that first move is simply saying, admitting publicly that they have been wrong on things in the past. They have made mistakes. They need to apologize to a nation. So I'm not going to sit down with people who feel they have done nothing wrong. Apologize that they have done X, Y, or Z wrong. Make amends. And when you see people do those sort of things, it makes it easier for that sit down and discuss process. Because you see that they are willing to compromise. They're willing to make moves to say that they have done wrong. But with Jack Day, with Irfan and these guys in the current crop of the PP, it's like they believe that they're gods. They have done nothing wrong. Everything they do is right. It's difficult to sit down and talk with people like that. Very difficult.
I can understand. So do you envision yourself returning to Guyana to work or to continue the struggle with our people while the PPP Civic is in authority? Even if they say, listen, let's have a conversation. As you said, there has to be certain behaviors exhibited before, and I can agree with that. But do you see yourself at this time, maybe in a year or 2 or 3, or before the next election, returning here to physically, in person, be a part of a struggle for Guyana?
Now, I have been part of a struggle under the PPP, under very, very, very risky circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Dark days when my life was threatened, family's life was threatened, friends were slaughtered. Ronald Waddle.
Yes. Yeah.
Crummy Wing assassinated. I recall incidents, 2 incidents where the Black Clothes Police cornered my vehicle in All Boys Town and threatened to finish me off right there and then. It was dark. It was Marai, and it was a cop they called, a so-called cop they called RoboCop, had their machine guns pointed at me. Dark area in All Boys Town. They cornered me. And they said, that's it. And I looked at them in their faces and I said, have your wishes. That's it. No begging, no nothing. Didn't give a damn about them because they were notorious killers in the Guyana police force then. Notorious killers. And they left shocked that here it is, maybe they're accustomed to people begging them, guys that they have slaughtered, they murdered guys before. Beg them. But here it is, a guy telling them, to hell with you. Do whatever you got to do. So the point that I'm making, it's dangerous times. I have been there, and very few of us confronted the vicious, the murderous criminal regime. After the coalition got into office, I personally felt a sense of relief that things are going to change from a human rights standpoint. Things have changed under the coalition. I'm a human rights activist. I oftentimes see myself as such. And when I saw that things have changed for the better, all Guyanese, I thought that it's time for me to relax. Not give up,
right,
but relax. During that process, I wrapped up with um, a couple of university degrees and certificates and so forth in criminal justice, criminology, terrorism studies, police investigations, and all of those things I was able to acquire during my absence from Guyana.
Okay.
Um, I'm currently doing a certificate in immigration law.
Excellent.
So I'm busy at this end as well, trying to find other ways and means that I can continue my activism work, whether through my criminal justice background, um, whether through immigration law or something. So I haven't given up on the struggle. And outside of that, I have two little beautiful kids. But my older boy is 22, but two little ones,
Right.
Emma and Jonathan. And I think kids always do need their parents around,
Understandable.
both parents as well. And
Right.
kids need their fathers around as well. For 5+ years, I was absent from my older boy's life, all because I was tucked away in a tiny cell, solitary confinement. Didn't get to see him every 3 or 4 months. I put myself in other people's positions also. And so I feel people's pains, especially the brothers who are incarcerated and cannot see their kids, cannot be there for their kids. And for me, at this point in time, whatever I can do in contributing towards being part of the struggle, whether it's through 107.1 FM, whatever my show is, Straight Up, or whatever other forms of activism, meeting with elected officials over here or representatives of various agencies, quite quietly, that to me is my contribution at this time. Whether I will be back there, once there's a reason for me to be back there, I will be back there. Nothing is stopping me from doing that other than priority over here with
Right.
my little ones. And I hope people do understand that.
I hope they do, because some people are of the view that if you're not here on the ground fighting for them, then you are not really a part of the true struggle. Indeed, your feet must be here and you must be involved in a war. Um, but as I've said, you are to some degree a trailblazer in your right, in that none of us would have ever been in solitary confinement for 5 years. There's nobody I know now in Guyana who's had that experience. More so, who would have been as strong as you are to endure that kind of that treatment as a political prisoner, which is what I saw you to be. You were known for standing by yourself and with maybe one or two people by the Chinese embassy and so on and so photographs. Remember that? You're standing there, you're in protest. So you paid your dues. Here we are now in Guyana, with a whole other reason to be engaged in this struggle, this fight for freedom. Share with me, please. Ah, there you go. Hey, Precious. I see the reason.
Yeah.
Now I can understand.
And she just barged in the door, just like that.
That's their right. That's okay. You can leave her in Carmen if you want to. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Sorry. That's okay.
Do you spoke to having 107.1 FM at the radio station here in Guyana. How are you able to, let me ask another way. Does the PPP or do the PPP Civic Administration engage your business, because it's a business you're running on the radio station? Do they engage your business here in Guyana in reference to advertising and so on?
Not even the PNC or the coalition.
Oh, you jump ahead then. Okay, see, I was about to ask you that afterward, but that's fine. You can go ahead then.
Yeah. Not the PPP, nothing from the coalition, absolutely nothing. So
Nothing?
nothing.
Now, hold on. Maybe I spoke over you. So let me get this clear. For the viewer's sake, you are someone who sits on your platform and you speak about the ills in society, you to some degree you were seen as 100% a support of the coalition, as one who is, and I was going to ask you afterwards if you're a card-bearing member of the PNC or any party, because people swear that you are.
No, I'm not.
And okay, and you're saying with all that you're doing, you use your platform, you've interviewed so many of the members of coalition and so on. You do not receive business support in reference to them doing business with your radio station.
Nothing from the PPP, nothing from the APNU AFC, nothing from the PNC, no support whatsoever. No
What
financial
is
support.
what is your license fee per year? Is over 3 million, is it?
Over $3 million. Yeah.
So Guyanese, I want you to hear carefully as Mr. Benschop is speaking here. I'm not in favor of any radio station or television station having to pay 15,000 US dollars plus for license every year. It is ridiculous. In the US, you can pay $300 or less sometimes and you get a license.
And the thing is, it Apostle,
Right.
I brought that very point to the then Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu. I brought it to their attention. I brought it to the board. I said, this is excessive what you guys are doing. They promised to fix it. Promised. They no
Still
longer
is.
promise.
Still stands.
Sorry about that, but yeah.
It's okay. And I appreciate that because we have to understand, okay, I need to understand what is it you're doing here. Because you're seen and you're labeled an activist on behalf of these people. But yet, you're saying that you do not, and I believe you do not receive funding in reference to business being transacted with them.
None.
The fee for licensing is atrocious, if you ask me. And I would like to see a Guyana in which a young man with a dream to be like you, maybe to be known as a media personality, as one who can speak and so on, he can practice his craft without having to be bankrupt. Because I cannot name 5 Guyanese young men in the 20s who can start a radio station now, apart from those who parents can handle it. Is it possible for us to really lobby on another level for this to change? Because it's not just about oil money, it's about what the average Guyanese should benefit from. And I believe that broadcasting is important because we must have platforms in which people can share their views freely without being controlled. Can you speak to that if you don't mind?
I do believe that, and they. I'd like to single out one particular person in the coalition for now. That is Attorney at Law Roysdale Ford. We don't have any legal matters at the radio station, but if we have legal documents to be fixed and sent into the Guyana National Broadcast Authority or whatever, Roysdale Ford plays a very, very good role with that, and he's done it pro bono. Outside of that, the party PNC or coalition, and you are correct that the 107.1 FM, we were there during those crucial months after elections and so forth, when nobody wanted to say anything. People were basically in hiding. You called them, they didn't want to speak. They were afraid to speak. No one picks up the phone and say, hey, we have some ads for you. We're not sitting at 107.1 FM. Of course, we have a staff to pay. We're not sitting and waiting for someone at Congress Place to call and say, come and collect some money this week. Or we know you have some members of parliament doing shows. All of these things, of course, we have to pay a bill. We have to pay a license fee. We have a studio that we run. This isn't a show or a radio show where you just turn on the cameras on Facebook and start talking. It's people are hearing us on the ground. We have a radio station website as well. So, water, it doesn't take water to run these things. But nobody has ever contacted and say, well, look, we want to support you every month because we understand the need for a radio broadcast on the ground, not just social media, on the ground, and that we need to preserve this radio station. Whether we agree with Benschop 100% or not, that is besides the point. But we need to preserve this radio station. I don't get the sense that people want to see um, want to see 107.1 FM succeed, people that should care about um, 107.1 FM succeeding. That's just the impression that and that I get, and it's beginning to rise daily. Whilst there are some that are very supportive, you know, the folks, the ordinary folks, are the ones who basically are here. They support. There's some who, whenever they can afford to offer a donation to,
Okay.
you know, those are the people. Those are the heroes. But the
I
big
understand.
politicians just don't give a damn. Not just the
And
people, not just the PPP.
that's noteworthy. I'm actually shocked because Ramson was saying that they're going to do things with their supporters and they're going to make the supporters wealthy. Excuse me. That's what Ramson was saying. So my thing is with, and I don't even want it to come off the wrong way, but you are deemed a supporter of the APNC. You allowed them many platforms on which you could speak. The least you could have done, as far as I'm concerned, is to be of some degree of business support to your entity. But that aside, we've seemed to, and we're winding down because I have so many questions to ask you, but I'm very cognizant of time. You have been calling for action in Guyana. There has to be action on the ground. Let's now turn our attention to the APNC coalition, PNC. What are your views in reference to the strength of the opposition, including the PNC being the major party here? What are your thoughts on the way they're treating with this situation in Guyana at the moment?
I think it's appalling on all sides that you have political leaders who have a very, very large part of their support base looking for actions, are looking for leaders to be very vocal, are looking for leaders to stand up and say to the PPP, enough is enough. We are not going to sit down and allow you to bully us as a people. We're not going to sit down and allow you to bully this nation. We're not going to allow and sit down and watch you sell this nation out for crumbs. We're not going to do that. Whilst those foreign investors, and I'm not against foreign investors, mind you, are walking away with all sort of benefits, duty-free concessions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and the ordinary working class Guyanese, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their political affiliation, have to be the ones to suffer the most. Those are things that our leaders have to be focusing on. And all the leaders of the PNCR and the coalition, they need to have some sort of retreat. They need to sit down behind closed doors, shut the cameras off, turn the phones down, turn the phones completely off, sit down, whether it's Congress Place or wherever, and iron their differences out to say that this is not about a man's ego. This is about a country, not just about a party. This is about a country. This is not about saving the PNC. This is not about saving APNU.
Right.
This is about saving the country and standing up for your people. Having said that, the party now has a new leader in the name of Aubrey Compton Norton.
Right.
Aubrey has been saying that in order for him to function, he needs to be sent to Parliament. I agree. Secondly, he needs to be the opposition leader.
Mm-hmm.
At some point in time, I do agree that he should be the opposition leader. But when I see this public fighting, you know, it's, for me, it's a turn off.
Okay.
And it doesn't do much good for the people, the support base of the party. Tug of war. It's got to stop. And I know Mr. Harman is probably watching tonight's program. I don't, if he is watching, Mr. Harman, this is not about ego. This is about country. Mr. Harman said during the campaign for the Congress that in order for him to be effective as opposition leader, he needs to become the leader of the party.
PNC.
Now, he's not the leader of the PNC. What's his name? Aubrey is the leader of the PNC. Aubrey is now saying, in order to be effective, an effective leader, he needs to be the opposition leader. Well, it's Mr. Harman who said that, and Mr. Harman should act. I think there ought to be some sort of compromise, and very soon. If there is no compromise very soon, then lots of people are going to be turned off. Lots more people are going to be turned off. People are going to walk away, and people will resign. Do they want that? Is that what Mr. Harman wants?
Probably.
I hope not. And I do feel that there should be some compromise. Now, with regards to leader of the list, I don't think that all of these things Mr. Norton should be fighting to become at once. He wants to be leader of the opposition, wants to be leader of the list. And there are some folks who believe that by virtue of Mr. Norton being leader of the party, he should be leader of all these things. Not necessarily. But what I do agree, though, that he should at some point in time become the next leader of the opposition. But let them work that out. They're party people. Let them work that out in a very respectable, sensible, and mature manner. Very
Excellent. Soon. Very soon. Are you, so you're not a card-holding member of the PNC?
No, never
What
been.
about the PPP?
Never been.
No?
Never been a card-bearing member of either of the two major parties. I have, since I attained the age, or well, upon being in Guyana, I have voted for the first time in 2001.
Okay.
I voted for Mr. U. Desmond Hoyt.
Okay.
The second time I couldn't vote. I was in solitary confinement in Camp Street. That was 2006.
Wow.
The second time I voted was 2011, and I supported the Alliance for Change with Ramjatan and
Trotman?
Raphael Trotman. Yes, in 2015, we had a little group. We thought that being in Parliament with one seat would able to make a difference. It so happened that the people wanted a change, and they voted overwhelmingly and rightly so for that change for the APNU AFC coalition. During the 2015 elections, we couldn't vote for, or people couldn't vote for us on the regional list or some one of the list, I believe. So I offered my vote to the coalition in 2015 for the regional list. And I say all of this to say that I don't think that for me holding a party card is a number one priority. And so I've never been able to come to that point. In 1997 or 98, when Jack Day was actually anointed in that seat, a group of us young people, we thought that, hey, that's not a bad idea to have a young man president of the country. And we thought, and this is what I said, that Jack Day should be given a chance. I said that.
Okay.
And 6 months, because during that time too, Mr. Hoyt was a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
I visited his home quite often whenever I'm in Guyana. And prior to that, when Mr. Hoyt visited the US, um, I arranged a lot of his meetings and I
Okay.
moved him around on many occasions. So we were very close.
Okay.
But I also thought that Mr. Hoyt at that time should have relinquished the position to a younger person. And parties need to start grooming young people, young,
Right.
competent people. And I became frustrated with Mr. Hoyt over that. We made amends. I endorsed him in the 2001 elections live on my show, TV show in Guyana, Straight Up. Um, right after that show, a call from the operator. The operator said to me, "There's a call on the line for me, a private line at Channel 9." And it was then the opposition leader, Mr. U. Desmond Hoyt. Mr. Hoyt said, "Mark, almost in very, very soft tone, thank you for your endorsement.
Wow.
Thank you for your support." I'd never forget that call from Desmond Hoyt, Mr. Desmond Hoyt. It is also my view that based on the numbers and based on what we saw, this sort of jiggery pokery at
Mm-hmm.
GCA, that, because remember, it came right off the heels of Claudette Singh ruling vitiating the
Right.
1997
Yes.
elections. Um, right there and then, I knew that the PNC won the 2001 elections, but they were cheated. That's
Yeah.
my opinion. But it just, showed that as a Guyanese, for me, if you have a leader, if you have a president that puts the country first, whether that president is in the PPP, whether that president is in the WPA or the PNC, that person should be given that support to lead the country. But when you have leaders or presidents who deviate from that norm, as in the case of Jack Dale, less than 6 months, I lost all confidence in him, all confidence. I just couldn't continue to say to people that Jack Dale should be given a chance. I just couldn't do that any longer.
And your words matter because you're a very fair-minded person, and for as long as you've got the drivers you keep speaking to, in my view, to represent people across the board. And I think that it's important for the PPP civic supporters to hear you, and all Guy needs to hear you, and to hear that you're speaking from a place in which you have the interests of Guyana at heart, regardless of who's leading it.
Yeah.
Some would never believe that because their handlers will not permit them to believe it. Rational thinking Guyanese can hear that out of you. And that's why I sought to have this degree of engagement with you. It's very candid.
Mhm.
You're labeled racist because of the things you say. You labeled so many things, but in this program you're saying, without being prompted, that you are for all Guyanese to benefit from the things, the resources we have in Guyana. And any president, you even spoke to the dear boy Jagdeo. If Jagdeo were doing what is right, in my view, you initially said give him a chance to do it because he's 35 years old. He's
True.
young. He represents a culture that could have brought so much change to Guyana.
True.
You were willing to give him an opportunity with your support to lead this country. He failed miserably. You are still giving them a chance, as far as I'm hearing you, to lead the country in a manner that's beneficial to all of us without prejudice, without discrimination, without tyranny. We're not seeing that. But you also spoke earlier to the thought of yours and the effort to have a one seat in parliament. And there's many talks here now in Guyana about having another party. People are crying for representation. Do you still see, or what are your views in closing? And I wish we could do this again because I have so many things to ask, as I've said. I
We're
don't think
closing
Guyana sees
already.
this side of you often.
We're closing.
It's up to you. I have
No,
time.
no, no. You're the host. I'm not the host. But let me say this, Apostle. This viewer is saying PPP brought back Mark Benschop to mock the opposition on talk show. I have heard that a couple of times from some folks, and it's nothing but myth.
Wow.
Myth. Um, Let me explain to George, and George has been commenting a lot, and of course, George is entitled to his view, and I wish to I wish to basically correct him. I have corrected folks with that particular question before. No one, absolutely no political party brought me back to Guyana. None. Not the PNC, not the PPP. Absolutely none. In 1997, Mr. Hoyt, whom I said we had a very good relationship, and I assisted Mr. Hoyt and the PNC in New York City at a time when nobody wanted to come out and say that they were PNC. Well,
Mhm.
for the most part,
Yeah.
the groups in New York City were dormant. They had basically none. But it was the same Mark Benschop who was driving around all over Brooklyn and Queens and other places and trying to gather up support for the PNC. It was the same Mark Benschop who sat with others, a few others, to form a a PNC group in New York that's called PNDC or something of that nature. I guess attorneys like Derek R. June and Dr. Noel Blackman and others can attest to that. When people didn't want anything to do with the PNC, there were guys who were drinking their little Guinness at a corner shop at 49th and Church and basements and so forth. I
Mhm.
recall when I took Mr. Hoyt into basements, days after when I go back to those same basement to hang out with the guys, them hangout shops, the guys would tell me, man, where you bring the man around me for? The man didn't do nothing for we. We want to see the man. And these sort of things. So I say this to say that I'm not just somebody who just pop out of a little hole and with no history of trying to do things and seek betterment for the entire country. So the only person who asked me to go back to Guyana was Mr. Hoyt. And I did in preparations for the 1997 general and regional elections. Mr. Hoyt sent me to then General Secretary Aubrey Norton. He called Mr. Norton to say, I'm sending a young man to you. Give him something to do. I sat at the office of Mr. Norton for over 1 hour. I'm still to be assigned something to do by then General Secretary Aubrey Norton. But Mr. Norton and I jokingly one day when they visited the US, something that I organized for them after the Linden, the massacre of the three
Yes.
Lindeners, and we were on our way to a meeting with the State Department in Washington, and I turned to Aubrey and I said, Aubrey, in 1997, when Mr. Hoyt asked you to when Mr. Hoyt asked you to when Mr. Hoyt asked you to give me an assignment, you didn't. Why? He laughed. He laughed, and he laughed, and he said to the other guys that Mark had a deep. Mr. Hoyt sent this young man with a deep American accent. I just look at you and laugh. So
Wow.
I looked at Aubrey and I said, wait, man, because of that, you just dismiss me? Because of my accent? Well, we just laugh it off, you know. I'm
Wow.
noticing some people saying that, one of the things that our folks love to do, they love to go back and uh, they um, They love to go back, like a George Tanner. You see, he's hammering home. They're not letting go. They're not trying to be. I like people who are objective in things and to understand that people go through a process, right? And people learn from their errors as well. Um, I was young then, and I believe that the leadership of the party should have been given to a younger person.
Right.
And some of the things that I uttered about Mr. U. Desmond Hoyt, um, he and I sat and Mistress Hoyt, who always calls me a son of hers. Um, and so we will smile about things. And even whilst I was at the Camp Street prison, when granted a phone call, I will call him. So we had conversations even days before his death. And one of the things we as a people have to do is to move on. But like the older guys, them keep, like a George Tanner and them, and
Yeah, that some people be stuck there, and that's
yeah,
why we
they
need to
stuck
have
to that.
conversation of this nature.
But the thing is, though, when I returned to Guyana in 1998, 99, it wasn't about politics per se. Um, of course, I was engaged then
Okay.
to my ex-wife, and a lot of people don't know that. And then my older boy Ryan, who was born in 1999, and I thought that why not? Let me find a way now to contribute with the little talent that I have, having
Okay.
worked at a radio station and so forth in New York City. Let me see how best this can apply to Guyana to give them a different style of talk show, television talk show, and so forth. And when I got there, I asked, and I hope those who feel that they have the answer to everything. Let me say this, that I first went to Channel 9 and asked them for airtime and gave them my plan. I knew the owners of Channel 9, Mr. Dr.
Blackman.
Noel Blackman, who, when the station came out first, I believe in 91 or 92, sorry, or sometime then, he asked me to leave the US to come back to manage his station, his TV station. But I said no. So I knew the Blackmans, and I went there with this plan for a talk show. And that plan was turned down. It was turned down because of the hefty fees um, per month. And I said, I don't know any business here. This is just a plan that I have, but hopefully it can materialize.
Right.
Then I found out that there was a guy, the owner of 69. I never knew of any 69 TV station or whatever. But when I went there, I when I went there, they quickly bought into the plan. And I was like, wow. They quickly bought into the plan. And the owner said, you can start anytime. And I thought that. So, one thing, though, that the owner said to me, he said that he is pro PPP. And that when he said that now, I kind of smiled. Because remember, I'm new now in
Right.
Georgetown.
Correct.
I'm not a Georgetown guy. And so at that time also, I was a bit impatient with Mr. Hoyt. And being as younger as I was then, there were things that I, out of anger, uttered about Mr. Hoyt, not because I was pro PPP, because by then I learned the game quickly.
Right.
What the owner of the station wanted to use me to do. And so after about a couple months, I realized that this isn't going to work out. This isn't what I want to do. This isn't me.
Right.
Right? And sooner, I realized that I couldn't be comfortable with that. I don't want any political party or person to feel that they own me that they can control me in any way, shape, or form. The station received ads. Out of that ads, I got a commission,
Okay.
and that was it. No PPP person ever paid me a cent for anything. But I also realized that it wasn't the right thing to do. So I quit the station abruptly. I think it was after an interview, a promise to me by then Commissioner of Police Larry Lewis. He didn't appear, and I went on the station and I said that apparently he was instructed not to come on my show. And somebody called and asked who he was instructed by. I said, Jack, it's got to be Jack Deal. The following morning, I got a call from the owner of the station to say that Jack Deere called him to complain about what I said. And that in order for me to be back on the show, I need to apologize to Barra Jack Deere. I said there will be no apology to Barra Jack Deere. There will be no apology to anyone. I jumped on a plane and I head back to the US. The owner of the station kept calling me. He said, come on back and do the program. Forget about the apology. I said, it's done. It's over. Upon my return, I went back to Channel 9. With the same concept, the same program. And before me finish talking about this program, management of Channel 9 said, your show is welcome here. So they denied me the first attempt.
Right.
But here it is now. And a lot of people don't understand because they saw this young man. Oh, he's new, the PPP bring him back, and the PPP this, and the PPP never brought me back. Of course, I had a good relationship with Chetty Jagan, President Chetty Jagan. I met him when he was opposition leader when I was working at GBC. He signed my book, The Western Trial, and we have maintained that relationship. So I was there leading up to the 1992 elections as well. And I left just before the voting. However, with that said, though, I always smile the way Channel 9 accepted me with open arms. Everybody just loved me because I'm attacking the PPP now. But let me make this point. Let me make this point clear. Let me say good night to Donna Harcourt, the mother of Courtney Crummy Wing. She's watching us. Good night to you.
Okay.
Good evening, Donna. Now, let me say this, though. During that time on that pro-PPP station that I found out not long after that they were pro-PPP. During that time, there isn't a single person could say that they have paid me to do anything at all. In fact, the PPP offered me a position through Robert Passad, who asked me whether I wanted to be a PR for the president then and work directly out of office of the president. I said no. A salary of $1 million per month was offered. I said no. And my exact words were that if I am going to be a PR for any president or any government, I must first accept their policies and in agreement with the policies to do that. Outside of that, I can't do it. And so I say all of this to say that if I were that sort of person about money, about wealth, we all love money, or like money, or we all want to have some sort of wealth, but it's how we acquire that. I just couldn't do that. And if it was about that, I would have probably gotten everything or anything I wanted. Anything. And I hope that answers the question.
You would have answered them extensively. I'm happy that you cleared that up because some things just need to be said. I appreciate that. But since you have the time and I have a few moments with you, And our viewers seem to be quite interested in our conversation. I'm so glad that they are. And please remember on Facebook, you can share the broadcast. You can share this so others can be a part of it. Let's move on finally to the COVID-19 situation here in Guyana. There is an ongoing battle,
You're
it
asking
seems.
me another question about the PPP?
Another question.
Because they are COVID too. Not, their policies are worse than COVID-19.
Well, well, oh, we'll have that clarified. But there is a record-breaking number of positive tests here in Guyana. We passed the 1,000 positive cases in one day, 24-hour period, 2 days ago. And in spite of all of this, Priya Manik Chan is seeking to justify schools being opened. And Irfan Ali too said we cannot close the schools. Then we had super spread events like the Kashif and Shanghai futsal tournament. And I see that there's some issue as of heard a voice conversation with Mark Phillips, supposedly, and others engaging in debate. But in your view, can you say firstly what if you are in agreement with schools being open because of your amount of influence? So from your platform, do you agree with Prima Chan and others opening schools at this time in Guyana? Let's start there.
I don't agree with the school reopening at this time. They should have taken at least another month to go through this new variant, to ensure that the schools are properly equipped, to meet with the executives of the Guyana Teachers Union, to meet with even the shadow minister of education and other stakeholders.
Yeah,
And that's
parents.
how you make decisions. You can't just, Priya just can't jump out of her bed one morning and say, or Frank Anthony, you say, schools must be reopened, and that's it. You got to consult with people, consult with the PTA, consult with the head teachers, headmasters, headmistresses, consult with people in society. And then this thing would have been, the process would have been better and smoother, and people would understand. And then we will get a better understanding as to what really is going on in the schools. Are the schools equipped for that? Do they have masks? Do they have sanitizers? Are teachers safe? What about the workers? It is quite
Yeah.
obvious that PRIA and the PPP, they do not believe in those things. Hence the reason they are in this current predicament. And maybe very soon, by the end of this week, we will hear that they have suspended classrooms. I'm
Well,
back to, yeah.
yeah, I hope so. Sorry about that, but I'm also of the view, and I know for sure that it's recommended in the U.S., the CDC, that if you're going to open schools, you must test the students and teachers, all the staff regularly. No one is tested here. And even for me, I was doing some concrete work, and I can share this for those who understand responsibility here. I was breaking some concrete with a jackhammer, a rotary hammer in my yard. I forgot to wear my mask, so dust went in my nostrils. You can hear me sniffing at the moment, and my voice has changed. And immediately I began to feel sick because I got a respiratory tract infection. But I live with people. We have our antigen tests at home. What I did is the responsible thing. As a father, I isolated. I didn't know what it was. I got myself tested. The test is negative, of course, but I wanted to be sure. And that's me in my house. My children don't go anywhere. Much more, thousands, 50 plus thousand students are being told by this Minister of Education that they should go to school. Nobody tests them at the gate. There's not even a thermometer at the gate. Nothing. And that's where people are being released. Here is where, again, my brother, I see the need for a very strong opposition in this country because the government seems to be willing and able to walk all over us. And I remember on your show, I would say that I have an issue with the number of statements that Harman would make. That's all he seemed to be willing to do, right statements. Norton is appearing to arise as the press conference guru now. So what's happening here?
I think, again, Mr. London, we can see that, and it is pretty obvious that the fight can get nasty between those two gentlemen. Uh, Good sense ought to prevail. People occasionally would want a press conference or press releases written and these sort of things. But overall, what I'm reading of the support base of the coalition or the PNCR, sorry, is that they want to move forward from the bickering, from the in-house fighting and the breaking down of each other. Um, Elections is right around the corner. They have to be prepared for an elections. Too much infighting, in-house fighting. Too much people looking at people with suspicion. Too many of these people want people to support their views, and if you don't support their views, they're against you. They try all manner of things to bring you down, and that's
Yeah.
not healthy for the party at all. Look at us, Reverend Apostle. We don't agree on everything, but we respectfully disagree with each other. We can come back again on this show tomorrow as friends, as brothers.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are some of them in the coalition who do not have that sort of mentality or that sort of attitude in their DNA. And I think that is hurting the party tremendously.
It actually is. And I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that we don't agree on everything. Um, and I love the culture where we can foster disagreements and still have healthy discussions. Um, it's healthy for all of us. And you speak to elections again. So I want to ask you another time. Do you see there are people who are calling for this other party to rise in Guyana and to challenge these two and so on? Of course, a person has been saying on your show, I should be a part of this. And the truth is that it hurts me to some extent, Mark, because it's the reason for it. The reason why people, when I hear people say, Mr. London, would you please represent us? The pain for me is, why would this have to happen? Why do we have to get a decision by people can look to two mega parties to say, you're failing us? Please, somebody has to talk on our behalf. I do not see that necessarily as something to be endeared to in terms of my heart, but it's painful to know that the people are suffering to this extent. But you spoke to the fact that you tried or you thought about it before. Maybe in one seat, the toss between PPP, PNC, one seat may be the icebreaker. Do you still see the need for that in Guyana now? The need for another party to arise with strength, probably 8, 9 seats. What do you think would happen if that happens in this country?
I oftentimes have this discussion with folks, and earlier today, that same discussion was brought up by, surprisingly, Lemon, the operator, and
Okay.
about the need for a third force. And my position on that is the immediate needs of the people ought to be addressed first. ExxonMobil, billions of dollars of oil. What is it that the Guyanese people are getting? What is it that the politicians are doing to ensure that Guyanese get a fair share of that and not crumbs, not couple $100 million in a bank account that sits in a third country
Yeah.
that decides on when Guyana should get its money or not. We have people who are being persecuted, wrongful charges, trumped up charges. Keith Lowenfield, Winston Jordan, Mr. Ben, you name it, scores of
Robert Lawrence
people.
and others, yeah.
We have lots of things to focus on in order to confront this illegitimate, this installed, this corrupt and racist PPP regime than I think at this moment than to think of a third party at this time. Do I see a third party getting up to the occasion? Almost every elections over the past 20 years, third parties pop their heads up. The most successful of them all, even though back then it was even back then there was the GAP WPA headed by Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy disappeared somewhere. GAP
Yeah.
WPA got into Parliament as a third party, along with Mr. Hardy and Rup Narayan. They were there. Then in 2006, there was the success of the AFC.
Hmm.
Then in 2011, because of the AFC, it led to a minority government.
Right.
So third parties do play a major role in seeing the backs of oppressors or oppressive regime. You saw the coalition of the PNC and Peter Degar in the earlier days
Hmm.
that formed the government then. And then we saw that also the minority government I spoke of a couple of moments ago that led to a minority government of the PPP that was about to lead to a no confidence motion and what's his name, scrap parliament,
Amatar.
Ramutar.
Yeah.
And then in 2015, a one seat majority because of a coalition government, because of coalition. So and third parties and so forth coming together. So third parties are important. But at this point in time, I think standing up and fighting for people's rights are far more important than talking about the entrance of a third party at this time.
And that, thank you. And that is exactly my passion, because many people seek to brand the People's Movement as a party and so on. And as one who would have coined the term the People's Movement, and even and out of Frank Anthony's policies and what he was doing to us, I said that, and it's even being echoed here. We have political two
See,
political parties.
there's
Somebody
a
said get
third
ready to
party,
join Ghana Oil
Guyana Oil
Party.
Party. Good
We have
evening, Mr. Cristiano.
two political parties here who are deemed giants, and I am yet to hear them honestly stand to defend the sovereignty indeed of Guyanese, of Guyana, in reference to our natural resources. Whether there are 10 different parties or three or a third party, it doesn't solve the problem because there's no election. And I said it on one of your shows as well. There's no election now for us even to consider that. My point is, and that's why I spoke so much to the opposition as well, there has to be good governance in Guyana, not about a third or fourth party. At this time, we need proper governance. There must be a very strong opposition. There must be a very fair and engaging government, one that seeks to engage all stakeholders if possible in reference to what's good for Guyana. It is not about somebody planning now for 2025, or maybe there'll be a no confidence motion against Ali, but we need strength.
Mr. London, I know it's your show. And this is your show, and oftentimes like to respect people's and their platform. But I smile when I see these comments. I'm wondering how can Mark agree with Mingo and Lowenfield when in fact there has been no evidence presented to say that these folks have done anything wrong other than being accused by the PPP of doing something wrong. Now, I've argued this, that if they have done anything wrong, then the PPP should not be the one stopping the elections petitions from being heard.
I agree.
In an elections petition is when we get to see everything, all of the wrongdoers, who rigged the elections. We will see that. So to that PPP supporter, ask the PPP, ask Barrett Jagdeo, ask Irfan Ali to allow the elections petitions to be heard. So that we're able to know whether Mr. Lowenfield did anything wrong, whether Mr. Mingo did anything wrong, whether Ms. Roxanne Myers did anything wrong. In my opinion, they have done nothing wrong because there's no evidence to substantiate that so far. Now, if they have the evidence, let the petition go forward. And then we will not only see if those persons have done anything wrong, we will see if Anil Nandalal did anything wrong, we will see if Jagdeo did anything wrong, or Irfan Ali did anything wrong. Let that be the case. But you know what? The PPP is afraid of the elections petition.
Well, that is why I said I hope that I can engage you again in another interview, because there'll be an entire broadcast, if you still agree, on us discussing the elections and what surrounds it in the petitions, which is more important to me, as you said. I've always asked for there to be a petition to be heard because it should have been one in the first place. But I must say at this point that I enjoyed the 2 hours with you, and it's much longer than I spent with you on your show. But thank you. I appreciate the platform. I appreciate the engagement. I appreciate the fact that you were willing to be a part of the People's Movement show and to be unprepared for these questions. You've done extremely well according to the viewership.
I think, Apostle, questions are answered honestly and appropriately when the person is unprepared. You get a better response from that person.
Always.
If you were to give me a list of questions and I go and I prepared and I don't believe in doing interviews like that at all. But I must,
Neither do I.
yeah.
Let
But
me
I must,
hasten to say thank you. Let me hasten to say thank you for this. Thank you to those who joined us on 107.1 FM, those who joined on Facebook, those who were part of the People's Movement in reference to, like I said, it's just a paradigm in Ghana, a mindset now where we, the people, are going to rise across the board and we're going to stand. You have presented yourself this evening, hopefully to the generation that I know do not know you, as one who has to be taken seriously in the context that you have a great interest in Guyana and you are unprepared to compromise because of that interest. And I thank you for doing that. I appreciate the moment you spent with me. Thank you for being so open and so candid, so forthright. Um, you are a breath of fresh air. Your
yeah.
words shall be
And
the last.
I just want to thank you as well, and to commend what you're doing, your activism, also your bravery in standing up when the people needed someone to stand up for them. You took that role, and that's the role people want to see the opposition play, in standing up for their rights, standing up against injustices. It's the only time the PPP is going to listen. They don't listen to comments people make on, and this is not to insult individuals who do their stuff via keyboards or on Facebook or so forth. Everybody has a role to play. But when you have a major opposition, that opposition must play its role. And not just once every blue moon or through press conferences or what is it, press releases and so forth and so on. And they want to see a vibrant opposition. They're not seeing that vibrant opposition. And they now are of the view that the party has a new leader, and that new leader should be given that opportunity to perform his functions. And I do believe that at some point in time, that new leader should be given an opportunity to go into parliament, and where he will have to prove himself that he is the man for that job. He is the man for that. That's when he will prove himself.
Right.
So if he is being stymied from executing his duty, so to speak, then there will be no way to judge his performance, to judge him as a leader. So, Mr. Harman, at some point in time, you will realize that compromises have to be made, and Norton should be given that opportunity to walk in the corridors of Parliament once again, because he was once a member of Parliament,
Yes.
but this time as the opposition leader. And let him prove himself. And if he cannot, then the party has Congress coming up in another 2 years or so. Then the voters within the party, those folks, the delegates, will make another choice whether they want to re-elect Aubrey Norton or to elect a new leader. But I do believe that he should be given that chance to lead properly. That's just my take on it. I'm a layman, and this is nothing new. I have said that before, and I say it again, that he should be given that chance to
Okay.
lead.
And I agree.
But
So thank you.
thank you for your time as well. I know lots of other things we could have been discussing. One of the things, though, that you asked, what kept me going in prison under those excruciatingly painful conditions, and I say this, that um, even after the death of my 8-year-old son at that time, that was very, very
Wow.
painful in prison to hear that your firstborn actually died in a fire along with his mom, died in a
Oh,
mysterious
wow.
fire in New York, um, and just couldn't get to bid a final farewell. I recalled the last conversation I had with him was died in December, was around September of 2002, I believe that was it. Um, and the message that I got from my grandmother, his great grandmother, was that tell my daddy that I love him.
Wow.
Tell my daddy that I love him. Those are things that actually kept me
Oh my
going.
goodness.
The regime has been very brutal to me in every sense. And sometimes I honestly, when people ask me, where do I get the strength from? Had it been them, they would have been a different person.
Yeah.
But I honestly ask myself that very question. Where do I get that strength from? Then again, I realized that even as a little boy, as a lot of folks who are watching, J.R. Crawford, we all grew up together, Clyde Pistano, and maybe others who are watching, that as little kids, we were there for each other.
Yeah.
They knew that nothing broke my spirit then, and nothing will break my spirit now. But I do believe that in continuing the struggle against all forms of injustices has to do with in memory of my 8-year-old son who died in that fire under mysterious circumstances. And I can't look at people because of their ethnicity to hate them. I am part of every ethnic group in Guyana. I spent more time with my Indian relatives under quarantine than I did with any other relative. 6 of us on one bed. I know that sort of lifestyle. I couldn't sit and eat with my Indian relatives and call them names or they called me names. That is not how I was brought up.
Right.
And so this for me is a struggle for all ethnic group, every single ethnic group. Because when I sit at that table to eat, all of us are there at that table. All of us, whether Amerindian or indigenous people, whether Portuguese, whether whatever, Indian, African, we are all sitting at that table. I cannot be racist. There's no reason for me to be racist. Unfortunately, for some of the PPP supporters, whenever you disagree with leaders of the PPP, or whenever you say something that is anti PPP, automatically they want to box you into that sort of a little area and call you racist or whatever. But I ignore those individuals.
You should.
But
And
before you
thank you.
go, I want to, if there are folks who have people who are incarcerated, young kids who have fathers who are incarcerated, I say to them, stay strong, and my prayers that one day all of you will be reunited as I was. And part of that unification didn't come easily. It came on one afternoon when, and I will forever remember this, when I was asked by the then opposition leader of the People's National Congress, Mr. Corbyn, and Mr. Basil Williams, former Attorney General, uh, to compromise on principles, to compromise on dignity, to compromise on democracy, all in the name of my freedom. I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at them in the eyes and say that, yes, I will compromise because I wanted to be free. And so when they asked me to write a letter to Bara Jagdeo, apologizing for what transpired in front of the office of the president, I felt insulted. And I told them right there and then that I'd rather die in prison with my dignity than to write a letter to Barrett Jackdale apologizing for something that I didn't do. I walked away and I said, send me down back into my cell. Let me rot right there, but I will not compromise. Less than 24 hours after, a letter came to the prison that Jackdale had pardoned me. And it's important that I'm saying these things so people could have a better understanding as to what transpired. I turned to the senior officers who were all excited. And I said to them that I am not accepting any pardon. That I do believe that I want to be exonerated by a court. Not Jackdale waking up one day to say that he is pardoning me, he's doing me a favor, because he hasn't done me a favor. He has wronged me for 5+ years. They took away from my family, from my kids. During the process, my son lost his life. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather died. My paternal grandmother died. Uncle died. Other relatives died. I didn't get that chance to bid them farewell. All because of a wicked, a vindictive, and an evil person in the name of Barrett Jackdale. All because of that. So I wasn't prepared to accept that pardon. What I said to the senior officers is that I reject it. Those officers spent the next 30 minutes begging me to accept the pardon. The entire jail with hundreds of prisoners were in uproar, begging me to accept. There were prisoners stamping in every division at the Camp Street prison, all over. I took that into consideration. And the fact that I spent 5+ years away from my son, only living son then. And I felt that it was time that he is reunited with his father as he was preparing for common entrance. The story is deeper, but I accepted my freedom. It wasn't a favor Jackdale did to me. They have wronged me.
Yes.
And for that, I may forgive, but I will never, ever forget. To this day, I still don't have the stomach, as strong as I am, to visit or to go to New Jersey and look for the tomb or wherever my son was buried. I still don't have that strength to do that.
Oh.
Thank you for your time. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, so that when people see or people hear me speak, they know it's from a position of strength and experience and not just talk. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy road at all. I remember there were nights when I was shackled on a cold concrete, but nothing on, absolutely nothing on in the Camp Street prison. It wasn't easy at all. And so for those who are crying out and asking, when am I going to be there to continue to stand up and represent people, I think I've endured sufficiently. But this doesn't mean that I've given up on the people. I haven't. I love them dearly, and I will continue to play a role in whatever way that to stand up against injustices of all forms. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am even further drawn to increase my degree of respect for you as an individual, because there's much that you shared this evening that we didn't know, that we haven't heard. And I cannot say that I understand or even can empathize. You have endured more than the average human being could take. And this is evidence that you're not easily broken. I would like to think that this evening, based on some of the comments I've seen, was absolutely necessary, even hearing it from you, because our country is about to turn into a direction that is so critical. It requires very stable voices and those who have suffered long and endured much to arise again to speak. We have a social media platform now. Technology is different. You don't have to be in person to be a part of the fight. What you've done tonight, I hope, would have given so much courage to other young Guyanese to know that they can stand, they can speak, and they can fight. We have to save our nation, and at all costs, it will cost us something, but we must stand. So thanks again, my brother. I look forward, hopefully, to your granting me another moment for us to have an extended period of an extended discussion on other matters, because you're not just someone who is there to speak and make noise. You speak from a position that is well deserved. I appreciate the time you spent. Again, thank you for spending this moment with me. I do not take it lightly. To the viewers, to the listeners, thanks to all of you. To the technician, I appreciate you highly. Mr. Benschop, do well until you meet again, my brother.
Thank you, sir. And thanks to all those listeners tonight. Thank you so much. And I applaud those fighters as well, those who are on the ground. There need to be other brave ones out there to stand up against the oppressive regime in Guyana. Stand up. Don't be afraid. Don't ever be afraid. Thank you so much, Apostle.
Bye.